Welcome to Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaife. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization of friends and neighbors, and we've been advocating for peace and justice for almost 15 years. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Gertrud Kauderer. Thank you so much for being here, Gertrud.
Thank you for inviting me to this show.
Gertrud is an activist. She's from Germany. She was born in Germany. She grew up in Germany. She's here in the U.S. visiting. Her first act of activism was when she was part of a human chain of 100,000 people who were protesting the deployment of nuclear weapons near her hometown. So she's got a very interesting history to tell us about today.
In 1983.
In 1983.
Yes.
Do you want to start by telling us why you decided to get involved with activism?
Yes, I'm just thinking how I can cut a long story short. It has something to do with my upbringing. And, I was born in 1937 into a loving family who were happy that they had a house where they could live, where that they had food and everything, because they grew up in very bad conditions. Mm-hmm. They were born between 1910, and they had lived through the First World War, through the Depression, to not having anything to eat, and then they came followers of their savior, mm-hmm.
with
the name of Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the world was just wonderful. I was one of the first children in this family, actually the second of all the brothers and sisters, and my life was really very good. That's my early childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. And of course it grew worse and worse, and just to cover the distance to when I got involved, because I was almost 50 years old at that time. Yes. I thought my life was great. I didn't want to have anything to do with politics. I didn't want to have anything to do with religion, because my father grew up in a missionary family, and but I wanted to be a good person. And then my children grew up, and my daughter, especially my younger daughter, who was then maybe 14 or 15 years old, she challenged me so much about my comfortable lifetime. She challenged me with news. I don't know where she got it from. Like, have you an idea what's going on in Nicaragua? I had never heard Nicaragua. Why? And it wasn't in the news. So she really blamed me, and she said, "You were a capitalist," and and I said, "Oh my God, she must be brainwashed by who is she associating with?" Mm-hmm. But she just didn't want to talk with me, and so I was really challenged, and I thought I should actually look what she's reading, and can you imagine what a mother's raising a child who goes so much against you, mm-hmm. and is actually infiltrated her brain, mm-hmm. with what you have thought all your life. Mm-hmm. But by reading her anti-fascist literature, I found it wasn't so wrong, mm-hmm. what she was saying. And I wanted to inform myself more. And it happened to be at the same time when there grew a really big peace movement in Germany. It was actually not a peace movement for something good. It was something against the deployment of cruise missiles and mm-hmm. and Pershing mm-hmm. Rockets in our vicinity, mm-hmm. just where we lived. And I said to my daughter, "Look, I think it's good what you're doing, because they tried to make a human chain covering the distance from the NATO, European NATO Command Center in Stuttgart, mm-hmm. To one of the designated deployment sites at Ulm, covering a distance of 100 kilometers. And I thought, well, that's great what the young people are doing. At least they are doing something for peace. Mm-hmm. And she turned around to me and said, "If you think that's something good that we are doing, you should have the courage to stand in the line." And I thought, oh my God, what is she asking of me? I can't stand with all those,
Radicals.
Radicals out there. I mean, we had built up a car dealership and a repair shop, and worked really very, very hard to keep that going. And what would she? What does she expect of me? But in the course of the preparation for that chain, I asked my oldest son, couldn't you please go to this circle where they always meet? He was actually serving in the army at that time, and he came back over the weekend, and I said, please tell me, are there communists in? And she said, and he came back and said, this is the last time I'm spying on your daughter. If you want to know what she is doing, go there. The minister is there too. And I said, okay, if he's there, maybe I can also go. He never turned up again, but I was totally involved, and I made the first public speech in my life at the day when the chain was formed, and it was in a place where everybody could see me. My husband didn't talk with me anymore, and I spoke for the conservative people, because I had learned that I have forgotten the numbers, that so and so much money is spent every minute on arms worldwide. Every minute, it was millions.
Billions,
and 20,000 children die of hunger every day, something like that. I'm not sure about the numbers, but this was something like, what's going on here? And I think everything is okay. And when I think back, I was actually reminded of the times when my parents lived, who had a happy life, while there were concentration camps, and where there were terrible things going on, but it didn't really hit them. So I thought, what is so much different if I look at that and lead my happy, easy life? So I'm very, very happy that my daughter challenged me. It took a very long time before we became friends, because everything what I did wasn't right. I couldn't please her for a very long time, and I got really involved, but it ruined my marriage, and I lost a lot of my friends. But there was one thing that I remember, that it was a birthday when everybody talking, many people. What are you doing? Do you know you're working for the Russians? Have you an idea what's happening in the other part of Germany? How they suppress their people? You have no idea. You might be right in what you're doing, but you have no idea how much you will be misused by other forces that have no other interest than really taking over. And I was something like mixed all together, and my daughter came in and said, Mama, if you go the way that you are going, you will meet many new friends. Don't be afraid of losing all your friends. So that was kind of a recognition that she said, okay, she's going for something.
Yes, and that's really important. Well, could you talk a little bit about a couple of the other organizations that you worked with? You mentioned an organization where you were involved with children of Nazis, meeting with children of survivors.
I have to cover a few years. I first got involved in the protesting against, and really having a great time. And then I thought what can I do for peace? I didn't have a college education. I didn't have I wasn't a teacher, and I was just this housewife and the wife of a businessman. I wasn't a businesswoman at all, but So what can I do? But I could speak English, and I was invited to a wedding in the United States. And I thought, okay, I must find out what are they doing over there. It was before internet time, so I wrote letters to people who might know somebody over there, and they, so I had some connections. When I was in Oklahoma, I was looking for a peace movement in Oklahoma City. I couldn't find one. Only years later, there are the Benedictine nuns, who were really very radical activists, but much later. But then I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and there were 6 people in the Arizona Center to reverse the arms race, and they brought me in touch with some Presbyterian people because there was a Presbyterian convention, and I went to New York, and I had a lot of addresses from peace offices, so I walked Manhattan in small parts. I started in the War Sisters League, Clayton and Lady Concerned, Women's Strike for Peace, American Friends Service Committee, and worked my way up to the Riverside Church Disarmament movement. I don't know. So I bought a big suitcase, came back to Germany, and my group wasn't interested. They were so anti-American. I may be a little bit exaggerating, but they were not interested in what you were doing here, because they said, look, they have offices, they have volunteers, they have paid members, they have offices that have been in operation for many, many years. It was a civil rights movement and what not. They have been, and they have such good material. They do research. It's not just like everybody wanting to do something for peace, not knowing how to do it. And so I had to leave them, and somehow I got an invitation for a peace march, which was already on the way of Europeans in 1984, just before the November election, and they were scheduled to arrive in Washington in 1984. And I joined them in Pittsburgh and walked the rest, and sometimes not being able to walk. I spoke in schools and so on. So this was the housewife, no high heels anymore, no makeup, not a hairdresser every 2 weeks.
Complete transition.
No pretty clothes, flat shoes, and I looked 10 years younger because I just started to live, and I did my first fast then, and I walked with Buddhist monks into Washington, and it was a really great time. And then I was invited to the end of the Women's Decade in Nairobi, where there were it was the end of a women's decade that had started in 1975 in Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark, and it ended in 1985. But there were so many efforts to make it impossible for non-governmental organizations to participate. And so a very rich American woman from Amarillo, Texas, said, you have here $500,000, put up something. And I worked for the woman who did that. I didn't get paid, but I didn't need that. But I had this great chance to meet the most interesting people from the United States and from all over the world. And for the first time in my life, I heard a lot of people complaining about what the Americans are doing in their country. But there was a woman from Nigeria. She came up to me and said, "You're from Germany? What are you doing here? Go back and stop your government putting their toxic waste in our country." I had never heard about that. So
that sent you off in a different direction.
Yes, it's a different direction. But I met people who invited me to go on a peace caravan, educating Americans about what's going on in Germany. And there was a really big peace movement there. And it was not only, it was really encompassing all kinds of ages, all kinds of political opinions, radicals, less radicals, and they really worked together.
Mm-hmm.
This peace movement, actually, I was three years on the Women's Peace Caravan, and then I got sick, and I knew the time is over. I can't create the same passion anymore, and I have to see how I can fix what I messed up in my family, and what I messed up with my friends. At that time, I was already sitting in a little garret apartment in Berlin with no money, or very little money. I had a bit of money from my husband. I didn't want much, but I wanted to really see how is it to live on very little. I didn't have a kitchen. I didn't have a bathroom. I had no washing machine, but I lived like I wanted to live what I preached.
Mm-hmm.
And you were asking about this organization that actually brought me away from activism, from going out in the street, fighting against, and so on. That was an invitation by children of Holocaust survivors
Mm-hmm.
who had done work among a group, and then after they had done enough work, they wanted to know what's going on in Germany. Are there descendants of those who did the perpetrators,
Mm-hmm.
and what are they? Do they suffer as much as we do? And that started a whole new era.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I had already come to the conclusion that my being such a radical activist, leaving everything behind and just going out in the world, trying to make peace, that's quite a lot to do with the legacy that I had inherited from the generation before me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some work on myself, and then I went to this conference in Cambridge, Harvard Medical School, and it was a confrontation. Yes, I went there with very much fear, but I thought, if they invite me, I have to go there. And that started a whole new era for me. I worked at least 10 years intensively, bringing together people from this side and the other side in dialogue, where we really listen to each other. And many friendships, lifelong friendships, arose from that.
Well, we're going to have to move along a little bit here. Your story is so fascinating that I don't really want to stop you, but we've only got 10 minutes left, a little less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what the differences are between activism in some of the other places where you've worked and in the U.S., and what do you think the U.S. activists could learn? What do we need to do differently to be more effective?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations about the election.
Mm-hmm.
People ask me
about Donald Trump.
People ask me,
Yes.
and should I tell about my feelings?
Yeah, why don't we talk about that? How do you feel about Donald Trump being elected president?
I'm
of
not
the
as
United
shocked as the other,
Mm-hmm.
as many of the other Germans. I read a poll
Mm-hmm.
that the top concern of the Germans is now the Trump election.
Mm-hmm.
In October, it was the refugee problem.
Yeah, yeah.
We have only 10 minutes. I have come to the conclusion that this is one of the big chances that we have, and we got a lot of the chances to change drastically
Mm-hmm. The way people think.
the way people think.
Mm-hmm.
One of the that there were historic chances.
Mm-hmm.
The First World War was so terrible
Mm-hmm.
that one should have the lesson was never again.
Mm-hmm.
The Second World War was even more terrible.
Mm-hmm.
One should have had the lesson never again. But if you always see that there are enemies that have to be eliminated, then it's the same thinking.
It just continues.
You see.
Leads to the next
Now,
war.
Hearing that Trump was president, I couldn't believe it at first. And then I said, no television, no newspapers. I want to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel this. This can be the end of the world. But it can be the last chance that people finally find out if it's not only, you see, I'm a healer. I think in the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if somebody comes to me, I want to make him feel better. But the next question is, what is the cause? Mm-hmm. What is the cause of all these symptoms?
Mm-hmm.
And we're only always dealing with symptoms. To hear a little bit here, everything is very necessary. You can't wait until your neighbors are harassed. Of course you have to do something. But what it really needs is much more drastically different. It needs a completely new thinking. And don't ask me what it is. I have no idea. I have no idea. But I know in order to solve the problems that not only like Republicans and Democrats are facing the same problem, poor people and rich people are facing, it's something so big. Like my first speech in that rally was, we have to work together. I come from a conservative background. I can't say I have to fight the communists and then I can be for peace. I have to work with them. I wanted to meet communists. Mm-hmm. I wanted to meet one person who voted for Trump and really listen
mm-hmm. to what they thought,
to what they think and why they. I've been here for 2 weeks. Another 2 weeks. If somebody is willing to talk to me, I'm willing to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think we have to work on this really together. Find alliances. You know,
mm-hmm.
if you ask me why I don't like the German peace movement, there are so many sections, you know, and if you do not follow their view of the world, then you are either too left or too right,
mm-hmm.
or too peaceful, or you know, not fighting enough. It's all little splits, and what you face here, we are facing in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Europe is falling apart.
Yes.
Germany is falling apart just because of 100,000 refugees who Angela Merkel, who is not my president, but I said, well, this is the best thing she ever did. And there are people who are really doing a lot for the refugees. There are people who are against it. But
mm-hmm.
this is only the beginning. I mean, think of climate change.
Yes.
And I don't
Huge
mention
issue.
anything else because I think we could talk about this subject for another hour.
We could easily talk another hour. I'm going to definitely have to have you back. We have a lot more. So your
Yes.
next visit.
I'm willing to come.
If you could just briefly comment on what you think the most significant issue is that you've worked on to date. I know you have a long history. You've worked on
For me, it's clearly the very little thing to making peace with a few of the descendants of the Holocaust, because that is what haunts me my whole life, and I think it will haunt the many generations in Germany, mm-hmm. Even if they are not aware what haunts them. Very, very clear. That was my most important issue.
Okay. The political climate in Germany, maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on that. How is it parallel to what's happening here? Is there a move to the right in Germany as well?
Yes, and it was growing by the leaps after Angela Merkel had let in mm-hmm. the refugees, and of course Germany cannot take them all.
No,
but we can work on the causes. Why do we have so many refugees?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have? Oh, okay. I'm not going to elaborate on the whole Middle East, but it's a total mess,
mm-hmm.
and it's not. It didn't come from from out of the blue.
No,
we all
and-
have a part in it,
Mhm.
and I think we are all here with a reason. And I thank you very much for having been able to talk about out of my heart.
Well, we actually have 3 minutes left.
Huh?
So we could continue on that subject, or I could ask you a little bit about is there an issue that you haven't yet addressed that you'd like to? Is there something else before you that you've thought about, I really should get involved in that it's really important? Or maybe you've already, what about this organization Interhelp? How does, or
Oh yes, that's
Interhelp.
my support group.
With deep
yes.
ecology? Maybe you say a word or
this
two
is
about
my
that.
support group, which is really very, very old because it is an organization. You know, I have learned so much from the Americans because whatever comes is great and big and innovative. It comes from the United States. I have a really great admiration for the whole nation, but I do not want to leave everything out. Who was voted for Trump? That's my interest in reaching out. Maybe there should be support groups where you have a possibility to reach out to each other and listen to each other.
No, I agree. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of pain behind those votes.
There's a lot of pain behind, and there's so much pain we have inherited.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
I really hope that people look up internet in the look up Interhelp in the internet. You
Okay.
know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Joanna Macy.
Okay.
Okay. But there is so much pain we have inherited, and I believe that people should be able to wake up in the morning and feel this is the right place.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I've come to this earth, and I feel good about it, no matter what they are doing or if they are just giving a smile to somebody who is sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Gertrud Kauderer. You've been just fascinating to talk with you. I'm so glad you could do this, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you all for joining us here today. And please join us for future shows. We'll talk more about how the wars have affected our local and national economies. I'm sure we'll be talking about the Trump presidency. Thank you for joining us.